Okay. So I'm going to try this out again. Looks as though I have figured out my voice recording, but I'm now not able to get the video on. So I'm going to go ahead and do this talk without video. And I apologize for that, but I guess it's better to be able to hear me than to be able to see me. So I'm going to go for that and say welcome to those of you who jumped back on. Apologies for being on mute that first round. How ridiculous. But you can, I guess, listen to this later on if you weren't able to jump back on. And hello to the couple of people who are here now. I will be looking at my email, so please do write to me as and even though I can't hear you all, I will check my email and we can kind of chat that way. So I think I will just go ahead and move forward and welcome everyone to this Women's Speaker Initiative, and especially today focusing on those of you who are in the health and wellness and mindfulness arena. So it's so exciting that you are all interested in your careers in speaking and in getting out there and telling your stories and inspiring the world. It's so important right now, and so thank you for all that you have already done, and I'm so excited for what you will do. Today, my intention is to share with you my story and experience in teaching and in speaking, and also to give you my lessons into either starting to do speaking or to scale in your current speaking career, as well as to speak a little bit about how to think about how much money to ask for and how to ask for money for the speaking gigs that you do. So I will jump in by starting with my story, my background, and how I got into speaking. So I did not think that I would actually do as much speaking as I do when I was younger. I think I'm much more of the kind of intellectual introvert type, fascinated with ideas and concepts and stories, but tended not to very robustly. And in fact, when I started doing that was through yoga. Teacher, of course, you are in front of an audience, albeit a very small audience of people, and you're speaking usually for an hour and a half. So that was really good training for me. And you know, I have a background primarily in psychology and cognitive psychology, as well as in integrative health. So I have a bachelor's in psychology and a master's degree in integrative health. And it was really, like I said, yoga that got me started speaking more publicly about these things. And I think that's a really great platform and place to start for those of you who are already in a career in yoga. So now I have my own business. It's called Copia Health. I do integrative health both for individuals and for organizations. I do workshops, I do talks, and then I also teach at a graduate school that provides master's degree programs in integrative health. It's called the California Institute of Integral Studies. And that's another really great opportunity for me to practice articulating a meaningful message, which is what speaking is all about. In terms of my experience in speaking, a lot of the first layer of doing that was in hosting my own retreats and workshops and events. The largest event I put on personally was about 150 people, and that was a really cool way to get an audience to speak to, and also get to have the experience of starting an event. Done a lot of speaking engagements for integrative health centers, for all kinds of businesses in the Bay Area, and for nonprofits as well, like social working centers. And I taught some classes and did some talks even at a transitional home for women moving through addiction and homelessness. And then I also do speaking and events at CIIS where I teach, and then have since done larger conferences, primarily yoga. I was working with Off the Mat Into the World for a while and was a speaker for their Global Leadership Summit. And then, as at least one of you who's listening knows, I also help organize an event called Camp Grounded, which is a summer camp for adults. And that brings together about 300 to 400 people each session. And I am grateful for the opportunity to be able to speak to those people and have the practice of knowing what it feels like to go and be heard by a large group of audience and to be seen. Of course, today I don't get to be seen by all of you, but to be seen and to be heard is a big part of this. And so I think since I'm not able to hear from all of you, although again, please feel free and email me questions or comments throughout, and I'll try and address them. I'm kind of tracking my email here as I'm chatting. So just sort of transition into talking about the 5 that I have for you from my experience in speaking and teaching. And I first just want to kind of say what I mean as the difference between teaching and speaking, because with teaching, really this is a kind of method for delivering content, right? That there's some idea or concept that you want to get across, some resource, and you offer that to a group of people, and that's a beautiful thing. And what I would say distinguishes then teaching from speaking is that speaking is a method of creating an experience of transformation through storytelling. So in terms of preparing yourself to put yourself out there as a speaker, it's really important that you practice storytelling, that you practice, creating transformational experiences for people. And that doesn't necessarily have to look like what, we might typically think of as a transformational experience, but that in your storytelling, there's an aha moment, or there's a shift in understanding, or there's a felt sense of change from your audience. And so that's a skill that you can develop in many ways, but that I would say is very important in becoming a speaker. Primarily, when someone is looking for a speaker, they want to have somebody who they can feel the energy and the passion and the presence of that person, right? So really letting yourself practice expressing that, especially when you're in a large group and your nervous system might be kind of frozen, to practice to express what really matters to you is a huge skill for speaking. And then the second thing they're looking for is a well-articulated message. And so that is all about having a concept and being prepared, and then just practice, right, in lots of different forms. And so these are kind of my key lessons in developing yourself out to be somebody who can have that presence and that passion, but also, articulate a message well. Right, so the first thing I would say is that mindset matters. What I mean by mindset is essentially the beliefs that you have that shape your behaviors, your thoughts, your actions in the world. And I start with that one because I think as a global culture right now, we really struggle with the mindset that there's not enough. There's not enough time, I'm not intelligent enough, I don't have enough money. and like that. And that belief can really prevent us from even putting ourselves out there in the first place. So that's my first thing, is to really implore you to do, set up some self-awareness practices or coaching or therapy or whatever you do, to really be working on establishing a mindset of sufficiency and a mindset of confidence, a mindset of value, of whatever it is that reminds you of your inherent value, so that when you're put in the position of someone asking you, what kinds of talks do you give, you don't shut down and forget or become timid, but you really confidently just express what it is you have to say and share with the world. Someone wrote ahead of time about, this general feeling of like, how can I actually get my vision into action? And, I've really truly found that it is my personal practices and my self-awareness practices that help me to connect that beautiful vision of, what I see as sort of my greatest potential to the actions of today. And that's a really difficult skill for some people, and it's a skill that can be developed really simply in our practices, whether it's, moving meditation or yoga practice, but something that helps you to start getting a really strong link between your intention and your action, right? And that's really fundamental to any kind of behavior change, but I'm going to include in that this change of, I want to start putting myself out there to be a speaker, or, be more vocal to tell people that I'm interested in doing that. Of mindset that also means coming from a space of gratitude and joy. One of my favorite sayings is that what you appreciate appreciates. And so just check in and notice if, in your relationship to wanting to move into scaling your career as a speaker or move into that field, notice if you have that sense of strain and struggle and not enough and all those kind of love, maybe jealousy and comparison and all those things that come up. And just, remind yourself to see if you can come to gratitude. Maybe it's just gratitude to Smiley, for connecting you to this initiative, or gratitude for the opportunities you do have to practice speaking now, or to the resources or people you have that might connect you to opportunities. And remember that gratitude and joy and health, these things are magnetic. What we're drawn to and called to by listening to a speaker is really that magnetism or that generative energy. And these are the things that are magnetic. And so when if you can do the practice through, practicing your talks or getting a speaking coach and that kind of thing, the more you can practice, the more you can get yourself sort of in that space of generativity and of aliveness. That's really what's going to draw people to you as a person. And that's a big part of what the decision maker about who to select as a speaker. And then make well-being be a part of your business plan. You've got to keep taking care of yourself and learn how to channel stress and to regulate your nervous system. Just very practically and functionally, when you stand in front of 300, 400, 5,000 people, your nervous system might have something really interesting to say about that, and it might not necessarily be helpful to you if your nervous system is going into fight or flight mode. So what we can do is learn how to channel that excitement and channel that energy in such a way that it actually creates a really potent and energized talk. But that's a skill to be learning. And so again, I would just, put that on your list, that especially if your body freezes, or, you struggle with that physiological aspect, that working with a somatic experiencing, or again, a speaking coach or leadership coach, or even therapist, you might learn how to channel that energy in a way that it really enlivens your talks that you give. One is about mindset. The second lesson I want to say is about really taking the time to discover your dharma. And when I say your dharma, I mean really listening for what you're really meant to do here in the world. And it doesn't have to be a kind of grandiose vision of saving the world that I know can be a heavy pressure for a lot of people. But that instead, it's really just about looking at, what is it that really calls you? What is it that, maybe even breaks your heart? What is it that compels you to serve? And then how can you match your skills and your expertise to that? And also listen for what's actually needed in the world. And that's that really beautiful moment, right? When we cultivate a skill and a passion or an insight, and it meets really beautifully with something that is needed right now in the world. And so, really getting clear on that. And as a kind of hint, the way you'll know you're getting closer to your Dharma is that, you'll feel a sense of reciprocity. You'll feel like, oh, this is really nourishing to me to give in this way. And it's also really nourishing to those who are receiving it. I can tell that, the people I'm lecturing to are really taking this in and listening and benefiting from it or gaining insight. And I also feel really revitalized and energized and excited about doing it. And you'll also probably feel that, time doesn't matter so much, right? It's that feeling of like timelessness that we get when we're really on the right track. In a practical way, learning to articulate your Dharma then is really where this becomes relevant for public speaking. And by that, I just mean learning to articulate what Marshall Ganz calls your story of self. That's really all about, your background and who you are, where you came from, and then these pivotal choice points in your life. So the moments in your life that, you were faced with some kind of challenge or decision, and the choice that you made really changed the trajectory of your life or had a big impact on you. And to be able to articulate why those moments were important. Right, and you'll see that in most storytelling, and whether you look at the model of the hero's journey or Marshall Ganz's work or any number of people, to start practicing talking about your story of self. So this is your personal story that has shaped and formed the message that you intend to give to the world. And I know this can be a kind of intimidating aspect of public speaking, is that you're really putting yourself out there. You're saying, hey, this is a concept that I believe in. I think people will gain value from this. And that can be intimidating, right? Because we often have this fear of rejection from the world. And, with that, I would just say, keep on working with that, the self-care, the self-reflection practices, but also start articulating your message to other people and ask them for feedback. What impacted you? What did you hear me say that you're going to remember? Did anything change you, the way that you think about after listening to what I said? Discovering your Dharma in order to be able to articulate your story of self well. Be strategic. So I don't know that many of you very well, but I'm gonna just take a guess in that if we were primarily taught in the health, wellness, mindfulness arena, we may not have been taught to think strategically or to think from the perspective of an entrepreneur or a business owner. And especially if that is the case for you, I really invite you to think about getting a career coach or a mentor in that way who can help you to think strategically. But primarily, I want to say that it's important to actually have a strategic plan. And you might consider that as your larger business model or just a strategic plan for to seek out new speaking opportunities. And so that can include things like, defining your target market. And so I know that especially in health and wellness, we can say like, well, my target market is the whole world because everybody needs this or everybody needs to eat, whole foods. And that's true and awesome, but it's not very helpful for you in thinking strategically. if you start defining your niche, as we say, or defining your target audience, that's going to be helpful for you. And then making a strategic plan to, okay, what conferences do I want to reach out to? Where might my target audience be attending a conference that I can go and then get in front of those people? So think about your target market, think about your channels. And so channels are places where people are going to actually hear about you and what you do. And so that could be something like, well, my channel is, is the yoga studio, because I'm a yoga teacher and I'm constantly talking with, my students. And maybe at the end of class, you start telling people, hey, I'm looking for, speaking opportunities. Here's my expertise. Let me know if your business or organization needs a speaker. And then also understanding your resources. And so that's, the people that help you, or maybe you have a lot of time and so you can spend a lot of time, reaching out to different events and conferences, or maybe your resources, a community that you're a part of that you might be able to network with. Business model U is a really great kind of very simplistic board for a strategic plan you might want to look at. But more largely, I would encourage you to know your theory of change. And theory of change, I would just broadly describe as sort of understanding the imbalance that you're seeking to address, being able to articulate the key concepts, resources, practices, and skills that you think help to bring balance to that thing, and then to be able to articulate the value proposition. Why does this matter? What is the beneficial impact of what you're talking about? Change. And that is really fundamental, because when you're a speaker, you're telling a story, and the story you're telling needs to have some kind of concept of change. Remember, I was saying, to be a speaker is really to create sort of a transformational experience for your audience. And so you've got to be able to shift something important for them, and to know what it is that you think actually generates that shift. So that's number 3, be strategic. And then my 4th key lesson is to just start where you are. So that is really the only place we can start, right, is exactly where we are. But this is what I mean by this is looking around at where are there actual opportunities for me now. I see people all the time develop out big strategic plans, and then they realize, oh, wait a minute, I've decided my target audience is such and such group, but I don't even see those people. I don't even interact with them. Maybe I need to rethink this. And so look around you, and say, like, where are there opportunities for me to speak right here, in the communities that I'm already a part of? Because every time you do that, you are creating an opportunity for somebody to see you speaking. And that's actually the best way to get more speaking engagements, someone seeing you speaking. And that's almost how it happens for me every time. I think I've been kind of enticed to get on different lists, or even different programs that are supposed to connect you to different speaking opportunities or whatever. And never have those been very successful. It's always been that I have a client and they say, hey, I love what you say in our sessions. Would you come and talk at my organization? Or, I do facilitate some kind of lecture activity at Camp Grounded, and then somebody asks me to come facilitate for a retreat. And it's like that. It slowly builds, and sometimes it won't even be until a year later. So don't assume that just because things aren't happening right away that you're not starting to build momentum in the direction of you getting opportunities in the future. And so then starting where you are also means that you might need to be practicing your pitch. And so very often especially kind of the larger you're talking about in terms of what sort of audience you want to get exposed to. Let's just give TED as an example. that you may have, an opportunity of maybe 2 or 3 minutes to be able to talk to somebody about who you are and what you do, what you speak about, and how you differentiate yourself. And so it's really awesome to work with a buddy or get a speaking coach and to start practicing your pitch, not only for the content, your background and your content, but also for, what you expect to be, how you expect to be remunerated for speaking. And so I'm going to talk a little bit more about money in a second, but to be making sure that you do practice those things. And so you might want to have, I don't know, your friend or a client or some community member, and you say, hey, I want you to pretend that you're hosting a conference and you're looking for a speaker, and have in your mind how much you're willing to pay me and where it is and all the details of it. And then I'm going to practice telling you what I do, and I want you to sort of give me feedback on how that went. Where you are, building community, and then also making sure that you just take it one step at a time and one day at a time, right? We can often get what I've heard called either possibility paralysis or analysis paralysis when we start thinking, okay, I need to do this, I need to do that, there's so much to do. Take some time, of course, to think about your larger strategy and vision, but then just encourage yourself to be accountable to be doing one thing every day. Even if it's that you go on your social media and you post and you say, hey, everybody, I'm starting to do public speaking. I'm so excited about it. Here are the topics. Make sure and keep me in mind. Right, and then key lesson number 5, last one, is to be bold. Being bold, I find, is very key, especially as women, because it is not the default that we are going to get invited public speaking. The default will be to invite a man to do public speaking. And so you might have to be bold in many cases and step forward and speak even when you're not asked to speak and all those kinds of things. So, be bold. And also, I just say that, to address that idea earlier of our limiting beliefs, that, to some extent, we may, even the most kind of well-known public speakers still always come across doubt and fear and insecurity from time to time, at least. And so try not to expect that you have to have none of that in order to move forward. In fact, to be successful and as an entrepreneur and as a speaker, you need to really be willing to take risks and to kind of move forward in uncertainty, because very often you will be trailblazing. And right now it's still the case that as a woman speaker, you will be a trailblazer in some way or another. Okay, so those are my key lessons. I'm just pausing a moment to look at my email to see if anybody has sent any comments or questions they want from me. And it doesn't look like it, but again, still feel free to do that. And so unless someone writes to me, I'm going to speak a little bit about just booking a gig. And, this, of course, sort of informs practicing your pitch and your ask for, how much you want to make for any kind of speaking engagement. So, the first thing I want to say is just choose wisely. If we're talking about TED Talks, usually to someone who is somewhat of a celebrity, right? They've got a lot of experience. They've probably written a book or been published in some way, or are pretty well known. So you may not want to have that be your first step if that is not your profile. TEDx, on the other hand, means it's independently created, and they may just want you to have done other conferences in the past, or at least some forms of public speaking that they can see evidence of and that it's well cultivated. So if that's the profile for you, maybe you want to go and, something like a TEDx conference or other conference like that. But then there's some, conferences that may not be as well known, but are certainly still very well attended. And those conferences are going to want to see that you've at least done presentations or lectures. They may be asking you to send a video of yourself giving a talk. And so be prepared for that. If none of those are your profile yet, you may want to consider starting by scheduling more local events and talks, even if it's something that you put on. And the more content you can generate or capturing yourself actually speaking and talking, then you have that content to be able to demonstrate to other conference organizers that you're able to do this. Talk about then pricing a gig. The thing to know is that there isn't really a rule of thumb. And yet one rule of thumb is that if you're a woman, you will probably get paid less. And we want to change that. So, I'm just going to talk to you about the kinds of things to consider, because there's never sort of one thing. And just to give you a sense of that, even for a keynote speaker, so the kind of main speaker at a conference, it can range literally from being asked to do it for free to getting paid something like $100,000 for one talk. And that's going to be someone like, I don't know, something like that. But in general, for a professional speaker with some experience, you can expect to get offered anywhere from, zero, doing it for free, to around $3,000 for a talk, and that may or may not include travel. So travel is one of the things you need to know ahead of time, including, I was asked to go fly to a conference in Germany. So, are they paying for my travel is a really important question to ask, because that will, of course, impact my profit. So other things to consider in addition to the location is just the length. Is this an afternoon workshop for a business, or is this a 1-hour presentation? And make sure and include prep time in there. And especially when you're getting started, you may get paid less just by virtue of needing to prep a lot longer, because you want to be well prepared. And to know that over time, once you've done, talks again and again, you have to, of course, spend a lot less time preparing for them. Know what type it is. So is it a local speaker series, or is it a big conference? If so, how big? How many people are going to be there? How many times, have they given the conference like that? Or is it maybe just a workshop or something like that? And then you also want to know who is actually the presenting organization. So, of course, if it's a tech conference, they're probably going to have a bigger budget than maybe a local nonprofit, but that's not necessarily the case. Oftentimes nonprofits can get grants and that kind of thing. And then, of course, one of the biggest determining factors is your experience and your credentials. And so that's something you'll have to build over time. And you may end up choosing in the beginning to do a conference or a talk for free, because you may be saying, well, okay, I'm going to get, content, or, to be able to demonstrate that I've done this, or maybe I'm going to be able to get clients from this for something else I do, or just exposure or visibility or like that. So, it's not necessarily the worst thing to do a free event, but make sure that you are kind of stacking value if that's the case. And then, just getting started, most conferences actually accept proposals for speakers online. So a lot of people ahead of this call were asking, well, how do you actually get started in the beginning? And oftentimes you're actually just going and researching conferences that are happening, and then you go and there's a link and it says submit your proposal, or submit your video, or submit your idea, and you go and do it that way. And in fact, that's most TEDx events are done. And because it's TEDx, it means it's independent, which means that it's done differently every time. But in general, you can actually go onto the TEDx website and sort of sign up to be notified for when they're doing auditions. And then you would get notified, and you would sort of put yourself on the list to do an audition, or even to be an organizer of an event. And then you would actually go in. Sometimes it's that you would send them a video, and sometimes you would actually go in and do kind of a portion of what the key idea of your event would be for those who are watching the auditions. So that's sort of the story of how it goes with larger events like that. But again, a lot of it tends to still be networking, just people who have seen you before or something like that. And then the other sitting down and actually looking at events that you think are awesome. Maybe there's conferences you've been to, or larger events you've been to in the past, and you are like, wow, these are really aligned concepts. And so then you say, hey, I want to go and do this next year, put me on the list, or go and reach out and email them. But in order to do that, again, all those things I was mentioning before, having your theory of change, having your story of self, having your key idea, practicing being able to actually express, powerfully and confidently and clearly. So those are my tips around booking a gig and practicing your pitch. I'm just gonna pause and check one more time my email just to make sure nobody sent over any questions, and it doesn't look like you have, so I'm assuming you're just listening and getting what you need out of it. But I'll kind of put out last chance if there's any questions that I haven't answered for you, to go ahead and just email them to me right now, and I'll respond to them. Giving you a chance to do that, I'll say that one of the things I didn't mention before that I do is I put on leadership, mentoring and leadership development programs that were originally geared for integrative health educators and coaches, but I've had people, in all forms of art therapy and community building and social change come and do those with me. And I don't have one scheduled that's open for sign up now, but I do individual coaching. If that's something you want to do more ongoingly, you can go to my website, which is www.copiahealth.com. It's COPIA.com. And reach out to me about, some of these things I've been talking about. Obviously, it's kind of a personal journey. So if you're really interested in committing to this and getting more support with it, whether it's more that kind of personal self-inquiry and ability to channel stress and to tell your story and show up powerfully, or whether it's the more strategic stuff like defining your theory of change and your target market. I love working with people on that. So if it's something you want ongoing coaching with, I do that both by Skype, and I swear I can actually use my video and audio most of the time, or in person in the Bay Area. So check that out if it's something you want to explore more. Otherwise, my call for all of you is to kind of integrate some of the things that you heard me talking about today, and to create a goal for yourself over the next couple of months, and to go and to email that on our email chain to the rest of the people in this group. And examples of goals might be that you actually, create a website. Or maybe if you've already created your website, you're going to build out a page that's about your speaking, and it will list, the topics that you commonly speak about, and maybe it will have a little video sample of you speaking and a link to say, book me for a speaking engagement. It's going to be something different, like, asking your friend to practice pitching, or maybe it's going to be developing out your theory of change, or, looking into your story of self. But do create one practical goal for yourself, and go ahead and email that to the rest of the group so we can check in on that next time. And I promise that next time I will figure out why it is that this YouTube Live is not working perfectly for me today, and I hope we'll get to see each other by video next time. And until then, just a couple of resources that I really like. One is called The Upside of Stress by Kelly McGonigal. She also has a TED Talk you can go watch, just about how to kind of channel stress for positive energy. And then also practically a book called Business Model You. I'll also mention Marshall Gans with his story of self. So those are the resources I have for you. Call to action is to go and write a goal for yourself around speaking, and definitely write to me your questions so I can answer them next time, and hopefully we'll be able to be a little more interactive. I apologize for the kind of talking at style of this one. I wish I had you guys to be able to see and interact with, but I'm very grateful that you're here and listening. And this will be recorded, so you should be able to go access this link and listen to this again, or of course, for those who aren't on right now, they can listen to that. So have a lovely, lovely day. I'm so excited to hear about your speaking opportunities and your visions. And again, please feel free and reach out to me if you're interested in having a personal session, or just if you have some things you want to chat about via email. I'm totally open to that. So have a really lovely day. Thank you so much for listening, and I will talk to you again in a few months.